Okay, I will dive right into it. I'm Tim Lewis. I'm one of the co-directors of the PBIS Center, also a professor of special education here at the University of Missouri. It would be fantastic to be in person. This is usually the point when we have the project directors together, where we break into LEA, SEA rooms, and basically have a lot of shared conversations around some of the challenges you have in place, some of the action items that you wrote into your grant, but might be struggling a bit to get implemented, and wanting to kind of share some ideas and do some brainstorming. So what I'm going to attempt to do is to do a very informal kind of presentation, talk a little bit about kind of some of the logic and thinking about making what I'm going to call community connections. I will monitor chat. So as we go, if there are questions, please put them in there. If you have great ideas, share those. All of this will be captured and recorded, including the chats, particularly if people have some ideas or URLs or links that they can share with others regarding some of the things that you have in place. So it is as difficult as it sometimes is to do this virtually. I want to try to make this as interactive as possible. I also want to sort of start real quickly and just acknowledging all of those of you who have grants, who have hung in there. So it sort of hit me. This is, I think, my 35th year in education, and I have never seen a year like this. I think hands down, last year was tricky with constantly switching and flipping, but hands down, this is one of the most difficult, challenging years for all of the LEAs, SEAs that we're working with and supporting have ever experienced. So one of the things that I'm going to really encourage you to continue to do is to keep your eye sort of on those long-term big action item objectives that you hope to achieve, at the same time giving yourself a little bit of grace. And also focusing on some short term. What do we need to do for the next month? What do we need to do now till spring break? What do we need now till the end of the school year? Don't overload like we oftentimes do in education, say, oh, we'll wait for summer break. We'll wait for summer break. We'll take that on summer break, because summer break will be here before you know it. And then summer break will be over before you know it. But keep sort of the needle moving, if you will. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as I said, kind of these community connections, and I'm going to draw on our district system fidelity inventory. The DCA, the district capacity assessment, other tools also have items related to this engagement with your stakeholders and the importance. You've already heard so far kind of getting student voices. You've heard about making those connections with outside agencies. And I want to kind of keep that thought and keep that conversation going. So hopefully you're familiar with this tool. If not, we'd really encourage you to download it from pbis.org. Even if you are not sort of traditionally putting in PBIS all the elements, I think there are several items that can inform any of the frameworks that you're putting in place. If nothing else, just kind of prompting some good conversation and some good discussion. In particular, we have 3 items related to this community connection. And the first is that we have actual involvement with our stakeholders. So stakeholder groups obviously are our families, our school boards, our community agencies, other youth organizations, mental health, juvenile justice, and so forth. All of those groups that interface with young people. As we think about us as an entity, families, of course, are our main consumers. Those should be our primary kind of stakeholders. But at the same time, we know the complexity with a lot of the challenges that children and youth bring require us also to interface and engage with lots of other organizations. So the first is actually sitting down and coming up with some goals and developing some policy. Now, you noticed our scoring guide is 0 to 2. 2 meaning you are the district we all want to come work with. You're the district we all want to come work in. So one of the things that I tell all of our districts that we're working with, as you continue to action plan, as you continue to self-evaluate, hopefully annually, look at these benchmarks as the ultimate goal. right? We used to tell schools, think 3 to 5 years. I'm telling my districts, think in 10-year timeframes. So from 10 years from now, can you have all tools? Twos, absolutely. The second is around sharing information. And sharing information should be both ways, not only disseminating what you're doing, but also getting input from those key stakeholders. And then the final one is sort of visibly supporting what you're doing. So hopefully, anytime your superintendent is in front of the school board, this is an action item, giving updates on your school climate transformation grant, giving updates on your implementation towards reaching those goals and objectives. If you have back to school nights or PTA or any other group or organization, key leadership within your district continues to kind of promote and sort of toot your horn, if you will, along the way. So those are the main items from our scale. What I want to do is kind of first just do a real quick check-in. So if you had to rate your LEA right now, and you can put these in chat, how would you give yourself a score? 1, mostly not in place. You've got maybe a couple ones, mostly 0. If you give yourself a 2, you've got a lot of things in place, but not systemic. 3, you are rocking and rolling and on your way to exalted sainthood. Lots of 2s, fantastic. Boy, I love this. I was going to put polls in, but this is one of the quirky things we learned about Zoom. When you have breakout rooms, you can't do polls. So this is working well. 2s, 1s. Fair enough, fair enough. So it looks like lots of bits and pieces are there, but most folks are saying we can still continue to work, and that's fair. And one of the things I love it at 2.25. Somebody's always got to take it to the next level there, right? 1.75. This is great. I think that was the Russian judge throwing in the low score there. Hopefully you're laughing. I can't see you. I can see Brian, and he's got a smile on his face. So, okay. Here's another thing that I want you to kind of think about. So I put the items up there and we kind of got the benchmark. This is the gold standard. When I work with my LEAs, I kind of have them think about community connections in these 3 ways. And I have them think about these 3 things along the continuum. So I tried real hard to not have a triangle in my presentation, but I just couldn't do it. And I snuck one in and I'll show it to you in a second. But if you think about the triangle, if you think about a continuum, regardless of what you're putting in place with your grant, think about what awareness looks like at the universal tier 2, tier 3. Think about what involvement looks like at universal tier 2, tier 3. And think about what support looks like, again, at universal tier 2, tier 3. And also think about what those things look like based on the key stakeholder group. So it might be community organizations, it might be business leaders, our families. We're going to differentiate where we focus and how we go about these things based on that group and based on where we are sort of in that implementation. And the other thing, there is no sort of right and wrong, and be honest and reflective. I've been in schools where, yeah, we all talk about involvement, but honestly, when I kind of pushed to shove, they didn't really want parent involvement. They didn't want parents showing up and telling them what they needed to be doing. And unfortunately, and I apologize for creeping into the political climate just a bit, but all the things I'm reading about, just the hate and the venom that a lot of parents are showing up and unleashing on these poor school boards, you can understand that. So our advice is always to kind of get ahead of this. Think about internally what it is and how you would operationalize that, draft these things, and then reach out. Don't sort of have that open meeting where you have everybody around the table and there's a lot of disagreement and everybody's kind of got their parochial interest. We always say, well, draft something and then put it out there for feedback and input. So here's kind of an example, and there's the triangle. I secretly snuck it in. One of your stakeholders might be mental health agencies within your district. So if you think about those 3 connection pieces, awareness, involvement, and support, awareness might be, you might just have some briefs on your initiative. You might share annual reports on your implementation, just letting them know, here's our goals and objectives, here's what we're trying to achieve. And the awareness is, hey, if you can contribute and help, that's great. But at minimum, it's important, particularly if you're serving students in our district, that you understand what we're all about. At the involvement level, we might actually start including some mental health supports across the continuum, thinking about mental health supports at tier 1, 2, and 3, not just 3, but what that might look like. We might, for example, have a mental health representative on our district leadership team. Those are just a couple examples of involvement. Support, then, we might actually contract for services, or we might actually have dedicated mental health FTE within our district to provide on-site professional development and technical assistance to our individual school teams. So we'll oftentimes sit down with our district leadership team and kind of just create this simple table and talk through all of our different stakeholders and kind of what are the key pieces in terms of our awareness, in terms of how we want to involve them, and as well as how we might have some mutual support. So this is just kind of an FYI and sort of one of the strategies that's worked well for us as we think about and trying to reach those key outcomes along community connections. Great, Lucille's throwing in having community-based clinician of all 3 tiers, without a doubt, that joint decision-making. So here's some examples that you can access on pbis.org. These are state annual reports. So yes, I'm talking to the LEAs, but I think you could sort of download these and take a look for some ideas and some suggestions on how to share, on how to document kind of some of that involvement, and how you've articulated some of the support pieces. So these are just some 4 states. I just pulled some recent ones. Within those, lots of good stuff. And I realize this is very, very small, but up here in the far right corner comes from Nevada. This is just a report on their actual school climate transformation. And they've got overall, and then you see on figure 10 there, the percentages of implementing with fidelity. Down in the lower left corner is Florida. So Florida's got a great picture of their state, shows exactly where they are in supporting all of the districts across the state in terms of implementation. And then equally important, they're sharing data. So they're looking at the impact of out-of-school suspension with their work. It's important as you think about that two-way communication, you continue to not only highlight what you're doing and how many trainings you've done, but the actual impact you're making. Up in the right-hand corner then comes from Vermont, similar things showing impact, down in the corner showing impact on suspension, but also some voices. People like to hear those stories. People like to hear the testimonials. They like to know that, hey, this is the path we took. Here's the impact it's making. These are the differences that I'm seeing in our school and our community. So those annual reports can serve as a great template to kind of help you think about how you might organize awareness, support, and involvement. I want to walk through one stakeholder group that, as I said, I think is really, really important. At the end of the day, families are our primary connection to the community. They're the ones that we support and serve. So I want to kind of talk through and walk you through just a couple examples of some of the things we've done with our LEAs in and around and using kind of this idea of awareness, support, and involvement across the continuums. Again, I'm monitoring chat, throw in comments, throw in questions. I've got time if I stick to my time here that we'll have at the end for some questions and some conversation as well. So thinking about reaching out to families, if you think about it at the universal level, we kind of put our primary focus on awareness. So we want to do lots of information and lots of two-way. So we're letting them know what we're up to, and we're letting them know, hey, if you've got ideas, suggestions, here's how you contact us. Here's how you reach out. We might have a parent on our district leadership team that kind of represents that voice. We're continuing to gather information and continuing to share. Now, as I said, our recommendation always, get your house in order a bit, draft some things, then send them out. It's much easier for your stakeholder groups to comment and respond if they have something to respond to. However, those other areas we don't ignore. We still want to do some involvement. As I said, we might have a parent on the team member. We might have some specific activities to partner with families. And we're going to continue to support. So we're going to give them information about what our larger initiative is. We're going to give them information about referral points And we're going to give them information about strategies to use at home, even at Universal. So here are some things you can do in your home. Here's the language we use at school. Here are the expectations, how we teach and practice, and give positive, specific feedback to let kids know they've mastered. Moving up to tier 2 then, the shift in terms of focus goes to involvement. We want to try to engage parents early. Remember, the logic of tier 2 is catching problems sooner rather than later, trying to put in some interventions, prevention before it becomes chronic and intense. We also want to try to do the same. Start forming those positive relationships with parents, not burning bridges. So we might have parent consent around tier 2. We might have an information meeting. We always, in the districts I work with, say, invite parents to the tier 2 planning meeting. Now, most of them might not come, but you've at least reached out, said, hey, we're concerned about your son or daughter. We're going to meet to try to figure out some ideas to help them be more successful. We would love to have you join us. We'd love to hear your voice. But you're still paying attention to those other connection points. So looking at awareness, letting parents understand what we mean by a continuum. What do you mean tier 2? Most of us outside of education have no idea what you're talking about tier 2. And then continued support. So looking at some ways that parents can put some home strategies, looking at real quick and easy generalization strategies. Then we think about tier 2, our primary focus shifts a bit to support. Now we know we've got a child with intense and individualized needs. We're probably also going to have that family with similar intense and individual needs. So thinking about that strength-based, thinking about using those FBAs, thinking about those clear interagency agreements, thinking about those mental health supports, thinking about providing some training, some supports for our families that might be in crisis and struggle. Now, it doesn't mean we don't pay attention to those other connect points. So thinking about awareness, continuing to send out information about individuals with disability, ADA, mental health, and so forth, letting them know if they've got concerns about their own child, who they need to talk to. Also equally important, educating our staff about the impact of a disability or the impact of trauma or a crisis on the family. A lot of times our educators get that one class in special education when they were a sophomore and they got a little sprinkling of understanding, but that's a long time removed from actually dealing with some of our families that are struggling. So it goes both ways. That involvement, looking at family advocacy groups that serve on our district team, having parents on the district team of kids with disabilities or mental health concerns or other issues and so forth. So the logic is we want to continue to look at those 3 connect points, but we might differentiate where we put our energy based on where we are in terms of implementation. So I want to share a couple fun school-based examples. Again, thinking about, generalizing these up, scaling them up to that district level. So the first is Benton Elementary, and I want to talk about how they increase family awareness, involvement, and support, how they focused on all 3 of those, using kind of the logic of what it is we do within our school-wide supports. So a little bit about Benton. It's a title school. So right off the bat, we've got large percentage of kids coming from poverty. We know that poverty is that one risk variable that's associated with so many other risk factors, healthcare, education, good nutrition, and so on and so on and so forth. It was a small population, high transient, lots of movement. Again, not uncommon in communities of poverty. One of the really great things that Benton did early on is got permission from their district to say, can we keep kids and transport them regardless of where they go if they stay in district? And the district graciously said, yes, we will figure out a way to do that. They had what I call reluctant families. So you go to that back to school night, meet the teacher night, and it looks like a scene from the old Western, right? The tumbleweeds are blowing down the hallways because there's nobody there. They had a very small PTA. Basically, if this school wanted to do anything, the teachers all opened their checkbooks and pitched in. And it's not uncommon in a lot of those high-risk schools that we have within or across our districts. They did their very best to inform the families about what they're trying to do. They sent out newsletters, emails, they did all sorts of strategies, but got very little input and feedback. So what they did is they sat down and said, you know what? We're focusing on what we want kids to do instead. We're teaching and practicing, and we're acknowledging mastery. What if we did the same with our families? What if we made it such that we put a concerted effort to promote awareness, to get them involved, and to figure out ways that we can support each other? So what they did is created this buzz passport. So their mascot were the bees, the Benton bees. And so everything was around bees. So they created this really fun thing called a buzz passport. And I'll show you what it means and what it looks like in a second. And what they wanted to do is two things. One, they wanted to support families. They wanted to promote ideas that we know are key and essential. Having dinner together, reading to your child, having a no TV night, asking your kid what they did in school today, all sound incredibly simple, but we know are key and essential to promote that engagement, to promote that mutual sort of respect and understanding and support of what's going on in the school, as well as trying to make schools more friendly. You know, I point out a lot of schools send out that, hey, can you volunteer? And when my kids were little, I would have loved to sign up, but my schedule is chaos. There's no way I could commit to coming in on a regular basis. But they would send out, hey, we need volunteers for sports day. Sports day is months off. I put it in my calendar, I will show up. I tell schools, districts, look, don't ask for volunteers for months. Ask for parents to show up and help set chairs up for a meeting. Ask them just simple things. We just want to get them across the schoolhouse door to then start engaging in that conversation. The outcome was then kids spend time with their parents, parents involved the school, and the local pizza place gave coupons, said, hey, give these out. So this is what it looked like, right? It had the directions, there's a little trifold, and they gave the options to do different activities across the different things. So they had trimesters, and each trimester, they kind of ramped it up a bit. So this was the first trimester. So they simply had to get one of these stamped, come to back to school night, go to a parent teacher conference, attend a PTA meeting. And then they had other activities once again. So that's sort of awareness, also trying to do engagement and support. So have breakfast or lunch with your kid, go on a family outing, put up a photo for Benton family. And they define family in a very, very broad perspective, not the typical mom, dad, 2.2 kids and the dog. It could be aunt, it could be big brother, it could be grandma. Didn't care. Family was however you defined it. And then you've got, again, those sort of actual reaching out and helping families support, play a board game together, eat dinner, go for a walk. So this is what they did. And they kept increasing kind of the little bit more like, well, we want you here a little bit more. So what happened? They had over 70 passports. Noted increase. So this was a school that I worked in for a long time. As I said, it was nobody. I would come to this school and I would see grandmas reading in the hallway. I would see big brother down there eating lunch. I would see cousins out playing basketball on the playground. There was a real sense of family engagement. And again, you saw all of these activities that they always put out had very, very, very little bit of involvement, just went through the roof. Now, Benton was my favorite example. I've had the good fortune to go to Australia several times, and in particular in Western Australia. And I was way up in the northern part of Western Australia, largely indigenous community. And I got a brand new favorite new example. So this is Mujala in Western Australia, tiny, tiny school, very remote. And they were telling me about the best activity they did to get community involvement was a cane toad hunt. This is a cane toad. They truly are that ugly. If you don't know about cane toads, in the eastern part of Australia, lots of sugar cane, bugs were eating them up. They said, hey, we got to figure out how to get rid of the bugs. Somebody said, there's something called cane toads in Hawaii that eat bugs. Let's get them, put them in our cane fields. They did, not thinking the cane toad has no natural predator. So cane toads proliferated to the point where they literally hopped across the continent and were in Western Australia. So they go out at night and have these cane toad hunts where they round up lots of the cane toads because they are everywhere. And they were talking about they joined the cane toad hunt. And the community was saying, hey, we like the stuff you're doing about respect, but that's not how we teach it. And here's more of the terms we use. And these are some of the stories that we pass down. And so they totally reworked all their expectations, all their instructional strategies. And once again, all of a sudden you started seeing some of the elders. All of a sudden you started seeing more family members coming into the school. So looking for that logic, looking for ways that you can build across those connect points, awareness, engagement, and support. So real quickly, some other related resources. We've got our interconnected school framework. This is the older version. I need to get the new picture. Great strategies, thinking about, again, awareness, support, engagement with mental health. Another great support, how to install that, the actual nuts and bolts. These are all pbis.org. You've got these slides, the links are on them as well. Wisconsin has, I think, one of the best state frameworks I've seen out there around mental health. And I know some of our colleagues in the center partnered as well as other in putting that out there. I really encourage you to take a look. In fact, they've just updated it and they've got these great little snapshots about what's changed and what stayed the same. Once again, these are all just kind of FYI things to take a look at to help sort of build on those community connections. Another great resource is our family monograph. There's a direct link. If you just go into pbis.org, Google family, or search family in the search box, you will find this. A couple other nice resources, the state annual reports right there. And then we've got this short video about a state advisory team. Once again, it translates nicely to LEAs as well. Some of the logic is geared towards more of a state leadership team, but the functions, the outcomes are pretty much the same. All right, so I've gone through that very, very quickly. We've got a couple, 3 minutes before we get yanked out of the breakout room into the next one. Any other questions? I've been monitoring chat. Haven't seen anything, but does anybody have, Brian?
Hey, Tim, yep, folks, put some questions in chat. And we probably have an extra 5 minutes. The other room is still having some questions of their own, so we'll go to about a quarter after.
Okay.
Yeah, but let's see what questions come up with. What questions folks come up with? Excuse me.
Yeah, and can they unmute, Brian?
No, but they can put
Okay.
their comments in chat though.
Okay, perfect. So throw your comment in, or I don't know if you can do hand raises. I don't know if we have reactions set up or not. These slides are in that deck. I actually did get my act together and got things in ahead of time, which is unusual for me. But yeah, the Benton passport was so fun. And it was just such a simple thing to do. Lucille's going to update. Great, thanks. She's going to talk about the ISF tomorrow. So Lucille and Susan Bear will have lots more ideas and information about that framework. Well, thanks. Now you're making me blush. Give me positive, specific feedback. I love it. I'm on a very lean schedule, sitting in my home office, talking to my computer. Absolutely. Integrate PBS and SEL. You betcha. Absolutely. And there are many, many more state reports on pbis.org. I just grabbed the first 4 that popped up. I would really encourage you to, even just looking at the format, what we've learned works really well is a bit of just updates. Absolutely get some outcome data, share some stories. People love to read from superintendents and principals and parents. I know here in Missouri, we send that annual report, it's electronic, to every district, every school board. We also send it to every state legislator. I don't know if they pay attention to it, but we have learned that a lot of staff look at it, especially if somebody from their region was highlighted. They love to take credit for that. And we say, please take credit for it. And indirectly, you have been instrumental in help, at least funding some of the initiative. So think broadly and share that information. I know in education, we're hesitant to toot our own horns, especially when it comes to significant challenging behavior and things as complex as school climate. But You remember this is a linear, it's a regression, not an absolute. Any sort of gains made, keep celebrating, keep acknowledging. Right? Kent shares that we got a new family survey coming out, PBIS apps, some quick, easy ways to get information. Small school district, engage caregivers, but few resources. Yeah, you know, a small school district, 250, that is a small school district. You know, there's upsides and downsides. The upside is everybody knows everybody. The downside is everybody knows everybody. And oftentimes we don't have those resources. I think if you focus on outcomes, saying, okay, here's what we want to achieve. Here's some of our challenges, and get some of those community leaders together to brainstorm. Have them focus on the outcome, not the problem. It's real easy to get people together and admire problems. But if you say, okay, we know there's a challenge. Here's what we hope to achieve. Anybody have any ideas? Anybody have any suggestions? You'll be surprised at what they come up with, especially, again, if there are few resources. People will step up with their time. People will sort of start becoming creative. You know, don't limit yourself to how we've always done business. I tell my districts, here's your problems, here's your resources. Don't do this. We're famous for that. Line them up and figure out how best to mesh. But as I said, keep the focus on what you want to achieve, not the problems. It's too easy to get just kind of mired down the problems. So Michael, that's the elevator speech, the 30 seconds I've got here before Zoom mercilessly yanks us out. Absolutely. Asking families what would be good for schools to ask them. You bet. You bet. It's fun to have that parent voice around there. Real quickly, as I'm watching these great stuff coming in, I was the parent rep of my daughter's middle school team. And when her girlfriends would come over, I would quiz them on the expectations and ask them about some of the teaching. And I remember one of my daughter's friends like, well, why do you want to know this? It's like, Emily, why does your dad want to know this? Like, just answer him, he'll go away. And so she looked at me, it's like, so you work with my school? It's like, yeah. It's like, can you get teachers fired? I'm like, sorry, I can't get teachers fired. It's like, then why am I talking to you? And she walked away. So hopefully you're smiling. Work with this board, inundate with parents, range of concerns. Absolutely, absolutely. So what ideas to share best with a rich parental involvement program? You know, Heather, one of the recommendations we always give when there's lots of, or even a few loud voices, is to try to give all the other voices a bit of volume. So one of the things we hear all the time is, how do you get everybody on board? And I always say, look, don't worry about the 4 or 5 that are complaining. Focus your time, effort, and energy on the 95% who are on board, who want to do this. Yes, there are lots of folks out there yelling and screaming. There are also a lot of folks who are not. A lot of folks who are horrified. A lot of folks who are appalled, but rightly, wrongly, don't want to enter the fray right now. I get it. It's so ugly out there. As I said, I just kudos to all of you guys for hanging in there. But look for ways to give the voices to other people, right? Ask them, survey, as Kent said, look at some of those school climate surveys, disaggregate. There are lots of ways to get other people's voices to the table. And if you allow them to do that perhaps anonymously, you allow them to do it kind of collectively, then all of a sudden there's a different story. And yeah, it's not going to make the headline news. Survey shows 80%. The headline news are always going to be the screamers and yellers, but you know you're on the right track. Oh, I'm being prompted from Brian that we need to move on. So thanks for jumping in chat. Like I said, it's so much more fun to do this interactively.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Appreciate always bringing us back to the framework. Jen Freeman, you